Yeah, we have improved.
And I mean, I was young.
New York to Israel, and when I came to Israel, I was.
The question is, why do all these people, why are they coming to Aish? Right? Why are they coming to us? I think it's because they understand that the way we operate and what we do is we believe in taking responsibility for the whole world and specifically for the Jewish people.
Talk about. One is your business and your business career and how you started it and how it became so successful. Also, your philanthropy in the Jewish world, I think in New York. I think a lot of this program is to understand the Jewish community in New York. And I think you have a very unique perspective. And then also a little talk about personally your Judaism and how that impacts what you're doing. So why don't we start with your business? How did you get started? How did you inspired to do what you did?
So, briefly, because obviously it's a much longer story, but today I have a 19 and a 21-year-old who, unlike you, are sleeping right now. But I hadn't had any children yet. I was in my late 20s. But I had this idea when I was seeing how women were dressing, which is hard to imagine today when everybody wears very fashionable things when they're pregnant and everybody talks about pregnancy. But back then in the 90s, people didn't. And they wore these oversized tents, and I got this idea that maybe maternity clothing needed to be more fitted, more fashionable, more like regular clothing. Nobody thought it was a good idea, which for any of you that want to be entrepreneurs, I always say that nobody ever thinks that anything new is a good idea. I mean, I guess we're living in an entrepreneurial time right now, but still, I feel like I asked all these fashion executives, they all said, save your money, don't do that, blah, blah, blah. But I couldn't get out of my head. I had no training in fashion, but I started it with very small aspirations. In fact, I recently spoke at Harvard Business School, and I was talking to the class, and I was explaining how I did this, and everyone was raising their hand saying, well, tell me about your business plan, tell me about how much capital you raised. And I was like, oh no, I didn't raise any capital, I didn't have a business plan, I didn't see white space. That's when we talk about, I just had this little idea, did it, and it took off in a way that I hadn't expected, really sort of virally. It was pre-internet, basically. And when I sold it in 2007, it was 10 years later. Again, I don't mean this at all, not to sound braggy, but when I sold it, it was the largest global maternity brand, globally, but that was really because I had signed these licensing deals with Nike and Target, plus I had my high-end boutiques. And I feel like women today dress differently when they're pregnant, and I think that, the brand had something, Brooke Shields and Cindy Crawford, because they had nobody else offering to do any of this. So it wasn't that I was so great, I was sort of the only game in town. So that was very exciting, and that's my business story.
So at what point, though, did it go from I don't know if you can identify that point, from you just had a nice idea and oh, this is nice, to wow, you see this is something big? Was there something that you felt was that turning point?
I think the craziest moment for me as an entrepreneur was that I was working out of a small office. It wasn't a store. My first thing was just an office, barely a window. You could come see me by appointment. You could call me on the phone. There was no internet, as I said. So call me on the phone, see me by appointment. I would see women on a one-off basis, make them clothes. When they came in 2 weeks later, I would pack them up and drop them off at their home or stick them in the mail. It was very simple, very small. I knew people were liking it, but I wasn't really thinking that it had taken off in a big way. Then one day, I got a call very early on from someone that identified herself as important at Nike. And I thought, oh, this woman at Nike who works there is pregnant, and she wants some free clothes. I'm really so tired of people wanting free clothes. It was actually quite funny. So I barely called her back. Then I finally called her back. I went to see her. She said, would you come in and see me? I was late to the meeting because I was overworked and also annoyed because I kept thinking that she wanted free clothes. I couldn't get that thought out of my head. It was completely untrue. She had never said anything about being pregnant or wanting free clothes, but that was in my mind what she wanted. I get to this conference room, and it's this size, and there are people sitting around, all these Nike executives, and they had all this press on me, and they basically said, which was so crazy to me, it still is, we're having trouble with getting the trust of women, so we've done all this market research, and we've decided that you have the trust of women, that women listen to you. And I was thinking, do you have the wrong person? And they said, we really want you to help us. Will you do a line with us? Phil Knight, who was the founder, is very fascinated by you. In fact, the US Open are coming up. Would you like to come sit in his box for the US Open, and all of this made me realize that maybe things were on a different level. And then frankly, that happened, and then when Target called me, which is a huge chain here in the US, I don't know if it's big in Israel, and also said that they were struggling with their mommy and baby customer, and that was their most important customer, and that they thought maybe I could help them with that, I started to realize that things were really at just a much different level than I had understood just from seeing these women one at a time in New York City. That like the word had obviously spread.
And in that transition from going again, like you said, sort of one-off type of thing to what were the biggest challenges then to go to that next step?
Well, everything, because I knew nothing. I was learning on the fly. I hadn't been to business school. I'd gone to college, but not to study fashion. But I was hiring people that were smarter than I was and better than I was, and listening to them. And I guess, again, like for any of you that are entrepreneurs, I usually speak to groups of entrepreneurs when I tell this story, so I'm not sure what parts are relevant.
Perfect.
But I would say that I think a lot of people get themselves, as you get more important, and people were, sort of saying, oh, Liz Lange, is maternity and Liz Lange, and I was getting all this press. But what remained really important to me was feeling like I don't know the answers, and I would say to the people I hired, but I learned very quickly that I should listen to the target buyers. Like, they know that target customer so much better. I know my Madison Avenue, my Beverly Hills, but they know the target customer. And together we came to a place where our collaboration, I think Target might say it too, became perhaps one of their most successful designer collaborations because, and long lasting. They call us an evergreen. We were an evergreen.
Okay, so my next question, I think you touched on it, and maybe what to add is, this group is, I think, like we said, like the social entrepreneurism has come up and thinking about, new ideas, new things that can help the Jewish people. So, and again, you mentioned a couple ideas, but if maybe there's something else, like what advice would you have to either people, in business or also socially, just that want to create something new, want to create a business or a company? Like, is there a specific advice that you would offer?
Okay. Well, like the first one I did sort of say, but I always think it, like you almost have to put blinders on and just kind of cut out all the noise around you of someone's already doing this or somebody thinks it's not a good idea, and just kind of move forward. Not that you're crazy, not that if, maybe it's not a good idea, but that, to a certain degree, you're seeing something that's the whole idea that others aren't. So the fact that they aren't seeing it does not mean it's not a good idea, or the fact that someone's doing it doesn't mean you couldn't be doing it better and in a different way. So I wouldn't let that, I'm always saying, like, don't let those things limit you. I mean, I think I touched on all of them. I really do think that if you're in a business that faces consumers, you need to stay very, very tight with that consumer and never find yourself in some sort of ivory tower where you're not in touch with your customers. Like that they'll tell you everything you need to know through that filter.
Right.
And I went there when I was younger with my parents. I told some of you about that. And then I, later on, of course, brought my children back. Is that my connection?
For sure. Yeah. Okay. I think part of what this group is trying to understand is what the Jewish community is like here in New York. So we met Monday night, actually I mentioned, with a group of Irish New York young professionals, but you're here in the Upper East Side. This is a very Jewish area. You have, I think, a good pulse of sort of what the Jewish world is like here, even through your friends or the community. How would you describe the Jewish community here in Manhattan? What's important to them? Some of the strengths, or maybe some of what you perceive are the lackings or needs of the community here, the Jewish community?
I mean, to me, but should I just be honest about it?
Yeah.
Okay, right. So, I mean,
These are Israelis.
Right, exactly. So I guess I'd say I think that one thing that I find really challenging living here in New York City on the Upper East Side, which I think hopefully is different maybe in other communities, very well might be, is that I think that Jews today in New York have become like very distant from Israel. Like it's not a given at all that you feel supportive of Israel. And I understand the idea that we should all be able to criticize anybody's government or any of that, but it does feel that there isn't enough of a. I'm trying to think of how to put it. I think, you saw we had this march on Sunday, which is wonderful. But that came about because it's been tough. It's been tough. Jews, I don't know that Jews in New York feel enough solidarity with Israel, enough supportive enough. I mean, we're very philanthropic, and we, as a Jewish community, and we do give, but there's this whole thing going on the college campuses here, where everyone is very comfortable now. Even here, it's almost like a badge of honor is to be very critical of Israel, and that to me it's personal. Like everyone has their own opinions on that. It's kind of explosive as a topic, but to me, I find that I really don't like it and find it to be a problem. Like is that? I mean, that's not the entire. You'll hear my close friend David Moore, who you're having lunch with today, is very. I mean, I respect everything he's doing for the Jewish community. He's a hero. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like there's been a watering down and a distancing and a.
Do you feel it's not automatic anymore that the Jewish community supports Israel?
I
and,
don't.
And almost that people are more vocally critical.
That's the way it seems to me. Right. That like if you say that it's something you care a lot about, like if you introduce yourself and you say, oh, but what I really love to do, I am an entrepreneur, but I'm also a climate activist. And everyone would be like, oh my God, that's incredible, how fabulous, oh, tell me more. But if you were to say, like even thinking about it now, if you were to sit down at a dinner party and I would say, oh, well, I have my business, but I'm an Israeli activist. They would say, like, what? Like, what do you mean? Like, why, what, don't you hate what they're, there's a lot of misinformation. I see it with my children. They follow a lot of social media accounts, maybe you guys follow too, where people that are like heroes to tons of teenagers spread horrible misinformation about Israel. So all that stuff is challenging right now on the Upper East Side of New York, I would say. And
you're specifically talking about the Jewish community. That's what you're talking
both. Yeah, funnily enough, yes. That's the worst part.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, not like, yeah. But I don't know. I mean, there's definitely some positive too. I'm making it sound
What's
too
the positive? What's one
I'm
positive?
trying to
thing?
think the positive. I think that no matter what, the Jews are always giving to Jewish causes. I think there's that and that.
Amazingly philanthropic.
Amazingly
sure.
philanthropic.
Just talk for a minute about philanthropy because it's very important to you. How do you make your decisions about philanthropy? Meaning, how do you decide what's important to you? How do you decide, what you want to get involved with? Creating your own internal priorities?
For me, I just try to think about what I care about, like any of you, obviously. And then also I think, like, well, if I don't do this, or will it get done? Like, there's a lot of causes that I feel like, if I don't do it, a lot of other people would be very happy to give to that cause. And then there are causes continuing on that where I feel like if Jews don't do it, who would do it? Like, like when I mentioned to you once, is like, Holocaust survivors living below the poverty line in New York City. Well, I guess some people might do it, but why would they do it if they weren't Jewish? I mean, they might, but like it feels like there's certain things that are just meant to be things that we Jews do, and I think that's how I'm not being terribly articulate about this.
Things that you feel you have a special responsibility.
Right, and they typically surround things that are Jewish and Israel.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we met 9-10 months ago.
Yes.
And we've been studying Torah.
Yes.
How did you even get interested in learning more about your Judaism, or maybe even to give everyone here a quick background of yourself Jewishly? How did you even get interested in studying and getting involved in studying Judaism?
Well, I realized that I was always talking about caring a lot about Jewish people, like we were talking before, Jewish causes in Israel, but then I was like, I'm sort of a fraud. Like I do care, but I don't know very much, to be honest. I don't know how it works in Israel. I went to what we called Hebrew school, but I don't really speak Hebrew when I was younger, and I thought I had studied, but I really knew nothing. So I thought it'd be interesting to learn more. I was connected to Rabbi Matthias, and what really blew me away was I had no idea how much of a sort of, I always say to you, like a prescription for life, how relevant what we're studying is. It doesn't matter that it was tens of thousands of years ago, if I'm even getting the timing right, that it's so relevant to today that almost any question I have, if I wanted to and if I learned more, it could be answered somehow there, right? And I wish I had realized that even when I was in business. There could have been decisions, I think, that would have helped inform. I mean, it's too late now, but that, and I wanted to try, although also late, to instill more of this in my children because of what I'm talking about. I knew they were going off to college campuses. I knew they'd heard what's important to me, but if I didn't start really walking the walk, then how could I expect them to care? So that was really, does that make sense?
Amazing.
That's
Amazing.
sort of what it was.
Okay, so let's open it up. Yeah. Okay, great.
Oh, it's great to have you in New York. Asia Torah is a family, and now they're all a part of our family. We're a better movement organization around the world because of this, and it's so good for Jews of Israel to come together with Jews of New York. And now we have to get the Jews of Mexico, Buenos Aires, France. All the Jews need to come together and be there for one another, and it's just so amazing that we've started this process here with Asia Israel.